I'm not sure whether our neighborhoods are as you say they are. You know, I work with people at the bottom of the scale, and we see quite a different picture to the picture you've been painting. I think we also need to talk about how whether or not median income is a good measure of what's going on. You know, we have people in your party who are earning in the millions of dollars, and I had my lunch at the Beach Road Hawker Centre. There's a 71-year-old hawker who is earning $650 a month. Your party earns less than, your ministers earn less than that in a day. Right. So we must not look purely at what's happening at the median, but we have to drill down to the individual voters whom we are here to serve rather than just to lead.
Nazem, you agree with Vincent?
Yes, I will agree with Vijay, because it's always the hardware that is projected to the world, but the software that we are into, the lower end of our lower income, which we should be addressing, and it will take up, like now if you go into healthcare, we are actually going into the Japanese kind of era where, you know, Japanese by 2055 you will have we're facing the silver population 1.2 is to 1 to take care of the elder, for the elderly. Where this is where we should have focus on some measures on healthcare to that. So this is a long-term thing.
Okay, we have just a few more seconds left.
I think what I want to say is that can the PAP guarantee that they will continue on their track record for the next 30 years? Is it safe to put all our eggs into one basket without an alternative?
Lina?
Well, I like to put in one word, like my husband usually say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So I think that we should have more opposition members of parliament.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time for this segment of the discussion. Mr. Tharman, I believe that Gerald threw you a question. Would you like to respond before we move on to the next segment?
I think the one thing that makes us different from most other countries is that the ruling party, the PAP, is a party that cares for the average Singaporean and the lower income Singaporean. There's no other society that comes close, where 85% of those in the bottom 20% of our society own their homes, and where the bottom 20% of society receives a very substantial transfer benefits every year, far more than the taxes they pay. We have one of the most progressive tax systems in the world, and certainly amongst developed countries. So this is a government that cares for not just those at the top, those in the upper middle income group, those at the bottom, the individual hawker, the individual cleaner, the individual production worker. That's our brand of government. That's the way we will continue to run this place.
I would just like to add, to the point about poor people, I think in any society, no matter how well we do, there will always be a segment who are trying to catch up. I think the important question is that what are we doing to help them, rather than just talking about them. I mean, if you look at the efforts that we have incurred over the last few years, some are very encouraging. We talk about workers who are stuck in jobs that don't pay very well. We have the Inclusive Growth Program. We work hard with companies. On board, there are already at least 200. And through the efforts of the Inclusive Growth Program, 20,000 workers will benefit. And I think that these efforts are what will really make a difference to the lives of low-wage workers. Instead of us just talking about them, let's put our efforts into really helping them through these very difficult but ultimately successful and effective measures.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your views. We need to go for a break. When we return, we will discuss two hot-button issues, the cost of living and foreign workers. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the program. In this segment, which will adopt the discussion format, we will explore the more immediate issues facing Singapore. MediaCorp's Today newspaper commissioned a survey recently, and out of more than 600 people polled, 1 in 2 say the rising cost of living is more likely to influence how they cast their ballot compared to other hot-button issues such as housing and foreigners. So let's kick off this segment by asking the opposition why the cost of living is the hottest of issues, and we'll get the finance minister to respond to the issues raised. Who'd like to start? Gerald.
During our house visits, I have to agree with that survey, because during our house visits and when we talk to residents, cost of living definitely is the biggest issue that they have. And we feel that very often the rhetoric that we hear from the government is that, oh, cost of living is beyond our control. We are such a small country and we are influenced by external factors. But we believe there's lots of levers that the government has to control the cost of living. And I think there's a lot more that the government can do to control it.
But what lever does your party have?
Okay. Firstly, the government has the levers to control it. Things like HDB prices, that contributes to a large part to people's cost of living. One of the proposals that we have is that the cost of the HDB flats should be pegged to the median income of the Singaporeans who are eligible to buy HDB flats. It should not be pegged to the market, and with a market subsidy, that's what the government calls it. Things like rentals, all are affected to a great extent by they contribute to the cost of doing business, and that contributes to people having to pay more for their goods and services.
Lina, SPP's views?
Well, I think the open door immigration has a lot to play with it, because we are trying to get in as many immigrants as, citizens as much. I think they say that they want to be about 6 million, if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think that this put a constraint to the cost of living, housing, medical, transport, school enrollment, and etc., etc. And I believe that we should look carefully to see whether do we need to have that amount of population in Singapore, because it's land constrained and we don't have hinterland.
Yeah, but let's just stick to the issue of cost of living. I would like to move on now to Vincent.
Okay, yeah. Can I carry on again?
A quick point.
The cost of living is maybe the privatization of all wet markets also lead to cost of living, because the wet markets, people can buy cheaper goods, but now with the privatization of all these wet markets, I think it's more expensive to buy.
Vincent, SDP stands.
Cost of living, well, I'm not surprised that that's a key issue, because, it's getting impossible to live in Singapore. We are one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in, and I don't think that's an accidental thing. I agree with Gerald that it's government has, that's part of what government is there to do, to ensure that people can live well. We have to remember, inflation is significantly high at the moment. Even the government itself is issuing alarm bells, sounding alarm bells about it. Other costs that we have that are also rising, healthcare costs. I know a taxi driver I was in his cab when he said he couldn't afford a cataract operation because of the exorbitant costs. Yesterday in the Straits Times there was an article about a young woman who went for a specialist appointment via the polyclinic, so a public patient, and she was given a 3-month waiting period. And she was told by that hospital, and she asked 3 other hospitals who also said to her that if you went as a private patient, your waiting time is reduced to 3 minutes. And the difference in price is 25 for a polyclinic and 70
but what's the one thing your party might propose to mitigate the
Well, we are
rising
saying
cost of living?
initially zero-rate GST for basic services. GST as a consumption tax, everybody who studies these matters knows that GST, a consumption tax, is one of the most inequitable taxes you can ever devise, because the rich and the poor have to buy the same amounts of rice and bread and oil and sugar. And so we say zero-rate GST for basic products and have a gradated GST all the way up to luxury items. We also say that the HDB housing system should be run as a non-profit.
Okay, that's been brought up, I think, already by Gerald. Nazem, your turn.
See, my question will be, the 4 of us have agreed to a statement stating the high cost of living. Contributor factor will be the housing, high cost of our house, the healthcare, education, in fact, and also some essential items, which I think the zero GST policy should be there. Then again, Gerald was touching on housing. I think the housing issue is very, very basic here. So, like I say, a public issue should be a public issue rather than commercial issue. So I think the ministry or the minister itself have put this public issue into a commercial platform. So it becomes a demand and supply issue. So if I want to go into statistic, if the rental flats are now, which is less than the supply and then the demand, the queues are so long. But then again, we are having few blocks. I mean, many blocks of flat which is redone and privatized to be rented as private rental flat. Why not push it
can I make one very quick point before you go to Tharman? I just wanted to say, Tharman ended the previous segment by saying that 85% of Singaporeans own their own homes. Now, this also is causing...
85% of the low income group.
This is also causing significant struggles, because these are people who have used their entire savings through the CPF to pay for their own homes, and they arrive at their pensions poor. That's why we have people who are having to work into their 70s and 80s collecting cardboard and tin cans because they have spent all their money on their house. So we are asset secure but income insecure in Singapore, precisely for the lower income group.
Okay, we have just a quick little while for Josephine to respond a little, and then we'll get to the Minister.
Okay.
Well, in my past 5 years as an MP, I see residents every Tuesday evening. And the concern over medical care, I think, of course, has to be looked in the context of whether we are able to put in place a social safety net to help those who really need it. And I can say for a fact that over that 5 years, there's not been one single person who was denied quality medical care because he could not afford it. We have a Medifund system in place. If they are in need, they can go and look for the medical social worker and they will get help.
Okay, with that, we need to end this discussion part of the segment. Minister, would you like to respond to all the views that have been presented so far, including Josephine's?
First, the cost of new houses for first-time buyers is about 23% of incomes, the cost of servicing the flat. That hasn't changed very much over time, and it's significantly lower than Hong Kong and most other cities, significantly lower than, in fact, the developed countries at large. It is cheaper to own and service the mortgage on a house in Singapore than it is in any other developed country. That's point one. Josephine has mentioned medical costs. Our Medifund scheme, which is for the lowest income group, those who are too poor to pay their bills, is being expanded. So if you take Medifund together with Medisave and then the insurance scheme, MediShield, we ensure that everyone will be able to get quality health care at an affordable cost. And that's what all the international reviews recognize as well, that Singapore delivers value for money in healthcare. If you look at cities, what really distinguishes Singapore, because all cities are expensive, what really distinguishes Singapore is that the middle end and the lower end of our society get significant benefits from the government each year, significantly more than the GST they pay. And that's the whole idea of the GST. The bulk of the GST is collected from the top 40% of the population and foreigners. And mind you, foreigners contribute a lot of GST, and we use the benefits to help those at the lower end. So if you talk about exempting food or any other essentials from GST, you're really taking away a source of revenue we're getting mainly from those at the upper end and foreigners, and reducing our ability to help those at the low end. So let's be straight. Low-income Singaporeans receive from the government each year far more than the amount they pay in GST. They receive it through workfare, they receive it through USAVE subsidies, they receive it through extra bursaries from preschool all the way up to university.
Minister, we have to leave the issue of cost of living there. We need to move on to the next issue, that of foreign workers, which has already come up in parts. Now, according to the same poll commissioned by Today, 7 in 10 voters are concerned with increased competition with foreigners for jobs, while nearly 8 in 10 say the congestion on public transport is a concern. So, Lina, you started just now talking about cost of living about the open immigration policy. So I gather the issue of foreigners would be an issue close to the heart of your party.
Yes.
What would you like to add to this?
Well,
the issue of foreigners in Singapore. What does your party propose to do about the situation of immigration when it comes to foreign workers?
Sorry, I just have to...
Given that Singapore does need an amount of labour from outside Singapore, but your party feels that the open immigration policy is perhaps detrimental or harming Singapore.
Yes, it is harmful to Singapore because they take away our jobs, you know, in areas of job creation. I think there should be a level playing field where, you know, these PMETs, you know, can come with the with the S-Pass, they can come in and they no need to pay CPF levy.
So what would your party propose to do instead?
Well, my party proposed that the government should set some sort of policy or some law to ensure that our workers get a job from the foreigners.
So if your party were the government,
yes,
what would your party do?
Well, we make that you meet the employers who are paying these workers from foreign countries to top up the salary of our local Singaporeans, because they save a lot on the, CPF.